This Finance Act, I think, has to be taken in the context of the overall budgetary adjustment, where 3.5 billion euros has been removed from the economy this year, and the impact that it's going to have is going to be very significant on everybody and citizens' daily lives. I think it has to be taken in the context of the changes in social welfare, where we've seen the reductions in pharmacist payments, which is having a severe impact on rural communities as we speak, as pharmacist has been adjusted for recipients across the country, and they're seeing significant reductions in their weekly payments on foot of that. And I think also then the inclusion of Sunday working in the assessment of job seekers' benefit and job seekers' allowance for claimants will have a significant impact as well. And we see that Fine Gael have constantly spoken about that they're not going to increase taxation, but in the budget speech in December they announced the removal of the PRSI threshold, which for all intents and purposes is increasing taxation, because for people at work, PRSI is part of the tax take out of their weekly salaries. So I think the fact that Fine Gael claim they're not increasing taxation is a fallacy, and it should be seen for what it is. I think the overall adjustment and the overall budget strategy that the government has is wrong. It can't deliver a return to growth that the government intends. There's no stimulus included in any of the projects and the provisions. Some small amounts in the Finance Act here, and I hear other deputies talk about SMEs and how 70% of employment in the country is in SMEs. I wonder just how many SMEs are involved in R&D and how many would have capital, who would have a corporation tax liability, that they'd be able to benefit from any of the measures included in the Finance Act. I would imagine it's probably very few altogether. Section 8 of the Act provides for the taxing of maternity benefit, and I think when you look at this in the context of the proposals by the Minister, seeming proposals by the Minister for Social Protection to actually remove the universal payment on child benefit, it can be seen as an attack on women across the country. And I think the taxing of maternity benefit is a really mean-spirited provision in the Finance Act, and I'd be totally opposed to Section 8 on that basis. Section 5, as I mentioned earlier, about it was intended, Section 5, where a lower threshold for key employees involved in R&D has been reduced from 75% to 50%. And as I mentioned earlier, I just wonder if that's been lauded as one of the provisions that's going to help SMEs and help them in their work and to grow their employment. But I don't see any provisions there to stop large multinationals availing of that as well, and I'm not sure how I think that should be included to ensure that it is directed at SMEs and small businesses that may have some research and development aspect to their work, and it should be pitched in a way that doesn't allow for large companies to actually benefit from it and piggyback on that change that takes place. The changes in relation to dirt and capital gains tax, the Labour Party has made much play on the fact that this is a tax on wealth, and as part of the wealth taxes that they have outlined as included in the budgetary measures. But there's no doubt that some very wealthy people are benefiting from dirt and capital gains tax, and the increase will affect them. But it will also affect very many small savers and people who aren't high net worth individuals across the country, and could hardly be described as tax or as a wealth tax on the small savings that they may have and the increase that the dirt will have in relation to that, and where people may get small inheritances and that the capital gains tax will increase on them. So I don't think that it can be stated to be a wealth tax. I think it's a general tax that is targeting everybody. And the one thing that I would wonder about it too is in Section 97 of the Act, that provides where property is held by a trustee on behalf of somebody who's involved under the personal insolvency legislation, that if there is any rental income from that property that's taxed will be levied on the person in the personal insolvency situation. And I just think that should be, if that is going to be the case, that the tax should be deducted off the rental income that goes to the trustee and not levied against the individual. Because it seems to me that if somebody's in personal insolvency situation, the fact that they don't have control of the property anymore and the fact that they're not benefiting from the rental income, it shouldn't be a taxable liability on them. And if the section doesn't provide for it, I think it should be amended to ensure that the tax would be collected on the rental income that the trustee collects, and that they would be required to pay it on behalf of the person involved in the personal insolvency. The one thing I would welcome in the Finance Act is that the extension of the fuel rebate to the coach operators and bus operators across the country. I think that is to be welcomed, and it should provide some small benefit to them and some incentive to them to enable them to continue on in business. On excise duty, I do think that there could have been a look at the excise duty on alcohol and maybe look at a way of rebalancing the situation. I was talking to a publican today who was actually just telling me that if he buys a keg of beer, it costs him around about €160, including excise duty and VAT, and he can go into a supermarket and buy the equivalent amount of beer in cans and pay €90 for it. And I mean, that to me doesn't make any sense in our situation, particularly when we see the harm that alcohol is causing in our communities, and it is predominantly through the off sales that the abuse of alcohol is taking place. And I think that we should be looking at rebalancing that, increasing the amount of taxation on off sales and looking at how to reduce it to ensure to maintain the retail or the publican trade so that people can drink in a safe environment. And I think that should be looked at. I know there's the Cabinet is due to sign off on an alcohol bill in the coming days, or may have done already, and I think that should be addressed as part of that.